In my childhood, stretched through thin threads of memories, my birthdays left a lot to be desired, especially when compared to my older sister's lavish celebrations. When she turned 16, her birthday party featured live music, rented halls, and gourmet catering, with a brand new car as the cherry on the cake. I, on the other hand, had to leave my home country for the first time in my life to celebrate my 16th birthday. The trip, while enjoyable, kept coming up in conversation as a present for my next birthday and 2 Christmases. It never felt like a real gift to me, more of an excuse to point out my spoiled and ungrateful nature for everything my parents did. Every time I wished to spend time with friends or ask for money to go to the movies, they reminded me of it. And so, as my 18th birthday approached, I hoped for a celebration comparable to the luxuries they had arranged for my sister. But my parents didn't seem to share my enthusiasm. I ended up having to share the celebration with a family friend for whom I had no warm feelings, and my gifts and cake were store-bought. When I confronted my mother to express my displeasure, she flew into a rage, which led to my tears and feelings of absolute horror. That birthday was the worst day of my life, and it still bothers me to this day. Now, on the eve of my 21st birthday, I'm wondering if I should even involve my family or if I'm just a fool, feeling neglected amidst my sister's celebrations. Maybe I should be more understanding and grateful. After I expressed my displeasure at the lack of birthday plans, my sister called and suggested dinner at her house in the company of her husband. However, an hour before dinner, my mom decided to join the rest of the family, even though they were not invited. When I expressed my disagreement, my parents erupted. It reminded me of a trip I took back in middle school with a group of other kids. That experience remains in my memory as a source of genuine joy and carefree fun. My sister, born into a family after her parents divorced, was raised in a slightly different environment. Her father, despite parting ways with our mother, continued to provide financial support in the form of child support until her adulthood. Despite the differences in our family circumstances, we shared the same mother while we had different fathers. Just because gifts from a school trip have turned into an occasion for you to recriminate doesn't mean you are ungrateful or spoiled. An expectation of equal treatment, like your sister's, is fair enough. If parents didn't want to create such expectations, they shouldn't have thrown a fancy party for one child, leaving the other with the remnants of the holiday. One should not expect their attitude to suddenly change dramatically. Unfortunately, in life there are sometimes situations where one child gets more attention than the other, bringing imbalance to the relationships within the family. Your middle school trip, while a joyous occasion, should not have been manipulated or an excuse to treat it as a multiple gift. It is wrong and unacceptable to use such moments to create feelings of guilt or obligation. Your mom may have felt guilty and tried to remedy the situation by joining in on the celebration your sister threw. Parental guilt is a complicated feeling, and every parent tries to deal with it in their own way. It's important to admit your mistakes and apologize to your kids if something went wrong. The fact that your sister was living through a divorce and her father continued to support her financially affects the family dynamics. Perhaps she did have a more affluent father, which allowed her to receive more generous gifts. But that's no excuse for how you were treated by your family. You deserve respect and should be celebrated just like any other family member, without guilt or disadvantage. The situation you are in is really difficult, and I'm sorry that it has made you feel this way. I hope you find a way to better understand and communicate with your family, because everyone deserves to be heard and honored. Next story. I have turned 24 years old and I am a woman. On the threshold of my wedding, which will take place in less than a month, I express my desire to organize a celebration without the presence of children. This conviction of mine has long been clear to everyone I know, and I have remembered to mention this detail on the invitations, emphasizing that the event is exclusively for an adult audience. In my experience of attending wedding receptions, I have encountered situations where children's screams disrupted the solemnity of the moment and sometimes even created chaos during the reception. For example, at one such ceremony, a toddler could not resist the temptation and, without waiting for the official cutting of the cake, decided to snatch a piece on his own, causing shock to the bride. My sister, who is 28 and has a kindergarten-aged child, openly admitted that she looks forward to enjoying rare moments of vacation without her kids. But my nephew's father, who had planned to stay with him on my wedding day, found an alternative activity. A friend of his offered a secluded vacation cabin for the week before my wedding. My nephew loved the idea of the trip, although his father expressed reluctance to take his son, claiming he would have to take care of the child that evening. Despite my love for my nephew and my willingness to compromise to remedy any unforeseen situations, I stand by my decision to have the wedding with adult guests. My sister has approached me about making an exception for her child, promising that she can ensure his peace of mind at the event. However, I have no confidence in her words, recalling a recent incident at our grandmother's 80th birthday party. At that time, my sister also promised to control her son's behavior, but he managed to cause confusion by suddenly taking the initiative from Grandma, blowing out the candles on her cake and shifting the focus of the guests' attention. When my father tried to remedy the situation, my sister expressed concern, claiming she couldn't find the right person to watch the baby. After offering to help her search, I faced rejection, as she does not trust anyone else to care for him. In response to her insistence, I explained that a wedding was not the place for childcare, and her partner was already planning to spend time with her and their son that evening. Given the presence of open water and extensive fields at the wedding venue, I expressed concern about the potential for traumatic situations, especially given her son's propensity for active play and disobedience, to which she rarely responded. With a heavy heart, but firmly, I explained to her that I could not make an exception. Her response was harsh. She accused me of being reckless for inviting our cousin, who had recently turned 18, claiming that I had shown bias. I responded by emphasizing that our cousin is an adult and capable of taking care of herself, as well as behaving appropriately at an event where alcohol and other adult entertainment is anticipated. I am faced with the difficult choice of not wanting a child to attend my celebration, which could even be the reason for our cousin's early departure. She plans to attend the reception for only an hour or two, celebrating her recent 18th birthday. My sister, with whom I share strong family ties, insists that I make an exception for her, but I'm having a hard time giving in to her request. My fiancé and I have even considered hiring security to keep the guests from distracting from the festivities and keep the atmosphere happy and carefree. My heart is heavy with the realization that my sister is my only relative with whom we have these circumstances. It saddens me to see her trying to shift the care of her child onto someone else's shoulders when she feels tired, and I cannot accept her terms. Refusing to compromise, I look for ways to maintain a festive atmosphere for all present, trying to respect the interests of every guest without exception. This situation is not your fault at all. Your sister has already demonstrated her inability to keep her child under control. She suggests that parenting and babysitting are different things, but this should not become your problem. You are correct in pointing out that her partner has changed his promises. Your handling of this situation shows maturity and a reluctance to get involved in other people's family issues. The fact that you offered to help find a babysitter is already the highest level of support. If your sister decides not to attend the wedding because of her partner's inability to keep his word, that will be her problem alone. The most important thing for you is to organize a dream wedding. Obviously, her partner prefers the company of friends and is not eager to take responsibility for the children at such an important moment. In this case, you should not deviate from your principles. If your sister for some reason will not be able to attend your celebration, try to have a piece of wedding cake delivered to her the next day. It will be a sweet gesture. Your sister is wrong to compare an adult teenager and a young child and expect the same treatment. You've already done your best by setting clear boundaries. Now she must decide for herself how to deal with her own child. Don't let this situation mar your day. Your celebration should bring joy and happiness. Congratulations on your upcoming wedding, and I wish that this day will be one of the brightest and most memorable moments in your life. Now I want to tell a different story. I have turned 65 years old. My son is 39. He maintains a long-distance relationship with his chosen one, a 28-year-old woman. Previously, my son had his own place and I had the pleasure of dining in their company when she came to town. This happened twice, and we found common ground. However, circumstances have changed. My son has lost his lodgings and now lives with me. I do not object to this, especially since he contributes his share of the household expenses. A situation has arisen where his fiancée has expressed a desire to visit us, despite my son's changed circumstances. This suggestion took me by surprise as we don't know each other much and I feared that our communication would be strained. Nevertheless, I decided to give her an opportunity for bonding. She offered to cook dinner for us, which I felt was a kind gesture. Despite her initial reticence, she tried to engage in conversation, especially when the three of us were gathered. Alone, however, her attempts to connect were unsuccessful. Had it not been for my initiatives, she would never have said hello to me first. She never addressed me by my first name, although I always called her by her first name. In my attempts to interest her in conversation, she made no countersteps to show interest in my topics. If I passed something on to her, gratitude was absent. During conversations, she avoided looking at me. When I prepared dinner one evening, she informed my son that she was not feeling well and detained us by spending half an hour in the bathroom. Approaching the table with a heavy sigh, she politely, but without explanation, declined the main course. These moments led me to conclude that she was not seeking a relationship with me, but saw me more as a barrier between herself and my son. I have always made it a rule to see her only in the common use areas of our home. Consciously, I avoided approaching my son's personal space. In every conversation we had, I strove to keep the tone neutral and easy to talk to, avoiding any intrusive or overly personal questions. One night, I felt my feelings reach a breaking point. I shared my worries with my son, telling him that I was hurt by the way she treated me without interest and with some rudeness. My son tried to comfort me. However, when I expressed the idea that his chosen one might have been trying to create discord between us, it caused him offense. He was upset that I had allowed this possibility to happen, that he felt I had allowed this to happen on my own. Sometime later, my son shared with me that his chosen one was angry. She was unhappy because he had spent a lot of time talking to me that night, despite the effort she had made to be there for him. However, he also noted that she did not view her visit as an opportunity to get to know me. Her primary goal was to see him, and building a family relationship, she felt, could wait. I expressed understanding, emphasizing that I appreciated their desire to be together. However, I suggested that next time they should consider staying somewhere else, such as a rented accommodation through Airbnb. It was unclear to me why they wanted to stay in my home for an extended period of time, causing me to feel like I was getting in the way, especially if the mutual understanding and family cohesion could wait. After all, the last time they stayed with me longer than a week, I expected her to fulfill her promise to cook dinner, but it never happened. I was forced to throw away all the food purchased for that purpose, without receiving an apology or compensation for the expense. A few months later, she expressed a desire to come again, but my son does not understand my concerns about this. They claim that her previous behavior was merely the result of her shyness and need for time to adjust, as well as her attempt not to impose herself, realizing that her presence might be burdensome. She has even apologized and declared her love for me. However, I doubt the sincerity of her words. It seems to me that she does not seek to deepen our acquaintance, and therefore I see no reason to seek intimacy with her. It is quite normal and typical for a relationship between relatives when there is not a close bond. But if she is going to treat me as if I mean nothing to her, it is better not to do so in front of me, in my own home. I'd also rather not know about the private moments of their relationship when I'm around, which makes me feel uncomfortable. Perceiving her behavior as rude or indifferent, and unwilling to allow her to stay overnight again, one wonders why your son finds comfort in your presence. And why does any gesture or word of hers seem to be an attempt to bring discord between you? She did not mean you any harm. Perhaps she was just experiencing nervous tension and awkwardness. In addition, she displayed emotions that may have seemed like a childish tantrum that lasted for hours. It's worth considering whether such a reaction is appropriate for an adult. Are you 65 years old or just 6? Until the situation reached a breaking point, you didn't express much concern. Are you attracted to the drama, or do you like the idea of remaining that special woman for your son? A point worth noting is the perceived wrongness of refusing the main course because of an upset stomach, which would have exacerbated the condition. Did she need to explain this at the dinner table after spending half an hour in the bathroom? Presumably, she was already uncomfortable realizing she was expected to be there and was probably feeling guilty. It seems that if she had tried to explain herself, her words would have been taken critically, regardless of their content. This gives the impression that certain people can have a tendency to dominate and cause fear, which is quite sad. When talking about his son's fiancée and claiming that she is a divisive contributor, it is worth considering his son's age. He is almost 40 years old. Interestingly, the story doesn't mention someone important to him, which makes you wonder about the situation. Perhaps the excessive attachment to his son is due to loneliness. When things settle down, he will marry, start a family of his own, have a home, perhaps children. Naturally, they will take priority in his life. This story sounds sad and full of insecurity. While sympathizing because of the experience, it is also important to understand the need to let your son go. After all, he is an adult. My next story. My husband's relatives were invited to our dinner. In honor of the occasion, I decided to cook steak, a dish that everyone is known to love. My husband and I prefer our steaks medium rare, so I purchased some quality eye ribs for us, which I then thoroughly cooked on the grill. Once the preparation was complete, I grilled them to the point where the meat becomes especially soft and juicy, to the point where it practically melts in your mouth. I believe that everyone has the right to enjoy food as they see fit, and it is not my job to tell anyone how to do it. Despite my efforts, I didn't want to spend too much money on extra eye ribs that I didn't think would be properly appreciated. In the end, I decided to take advantage of the special offer on the more affordable cuts of meat. At the dinner, everything went off without a single complaint. The guests were happy with the entrees I served, savoring every bite. However, my mother-in-law decided to conduct her own investigation, searching my bag for my shopping receipt. Her actions left me perplexed, for I did not expect my efforts to be appreciated in such a manner. When she discovered that the steaks served were not of the highest quality, it caused displeasure. My entourage assumed that I should apologize for the choice served, but my only regret is that I did not cover up the evidence of my choice more thoroughly. My decision to purchase more affordable steaks was motivated by a desire to please everyone without overspending, but I admit I could have approached the matter more thoughtfully. Let me openly share. Guests were happily enjoying the dishes served until they were faced with the surprise of finding out how much they cost. I'm surprised at how easily your mother-in-law went through your bag, as if this behavior was completely commonplace. In such a situation, everyone may feel uncomfortable because it is not customary to serve guests less expensive pieces of meat, even if your culinary preferences coincide. It is also unacceptable to consider the personal belongings of guests, be it purses or handbags. If one decides to take such a step, it is important to be as careful as possible and not to leave any traces behind. It is worth emphasizing that in this story, the rules of etiquette were violated. You may have saved money on the choice of dishes, and the mother-in-law violated personal boundaries, digging through your purse. In this context, her act could be considered a more gross violation. However, as a host, your task is to provide your guests with everything they need, without striving for excess, especially if it is assumed that high-quality drinks will be misused, for example, mixed with cola. In such a case, it is wise to serve medium-quality drinks that are appropriate and expected in the situation. A story that really surprised me. Since my husband passed away, I have felt a deep loneliness. I am 55 years old. My family has a son, who is 27 years old, and 2 grandchildren, a male teenager and a little girl. A lot has happened in the last 6 months in my son's life. He is expecting an addition to the family, twins from his current wife of 27 years. His firstborn was born to his previous girlfriend when they were 25 years old each. My son has an outstanding mind and is not lacking in life wisdom. When he was young, he fell madly in love with his first girlfriend. When he was accepted to the university, the dream of which lived in his heart, the girl made the decision to drop out and follow him. She dreamed of creating a perfect family coziness with him. Despite this, their relationship did not stand the test of time and broke up after a year. Nevertheless, my son did not give up on his commitment. He continued to support his child by paying child support and finding time to meet despite his studies and the stress of college. Life moved on, and my son found new happiness. Within the walls of college, he met a wonderful girl, beautiful and kind. Their relationship led to a marriage based on mutual understanding and support. My son's ex-girlfriend also found a new life partner with 3 other children, a female teenager, a preschooler, and a little boy. Earlier this month, she approached my son for help as she needed a place to live. It eventually became clear that her new partner left a lot to be desired. 7 months pregnant, with no job, no education, and with 4 children in her arms, she was in a difficult situation. To make matters worse, she had mental health issues that made it difficult to hold down a job. She recently spent a week in a homeless shelter. My son and his spouse were incredibly kind in offering her and the children temporary shelter in their home, which they provided free of charge until she found another place to live. My son's daughter-in-law's parents, who work in real estate, rented one of their properties to them at a reduced price. It was a 2-bedroom house, although my son's family, given their financial constraints, a difficult situation with a premature daughter, and the impending birth of twins, needed more space. In the 1990s, I inherited from my grandparents a spacious 7-bedroom house with 3 additional rooms that had been converted into an office library and art studio. My husband and I, being an ordinary middle-class couple, have always been extremely appreciative of this generosity. This house is so large that it could be called a mansion. I am currently living in it alone after my husband passed away. I have been in discussion with my son and his wife about moving into the spacious house I inherited. We came to a general consensus that this large house is overkill for a single woman. However, we agreed that my son's ex-spouse and her children would not be able to reside with them. We decided that if my grandson had no place to live, he could always come to me, but the rest of their family is not within my circle of friends. Don't think I don't have sympathy for their situation, but they are still not part of my family. I am concerned about the possible strained relationships that could arise, especially since pregnancy is already a stressful period. It would be unfair to require my daughter-in-law to share her husband's attention with his ex. I don't want my home to become a place of marital discord. After discussing the situation with my daughter-in-law's parents, we decided to give my son's ex-spouse a month to find another place to live. During this time, my son would be preparing to move. My son's ex-spouse was clearly unhappy with my decision to impose these rules in my home, considering it an attempt to separate her family. I explained to her that my rules apply in my home. You really have no obligation to shelter her and her 3 children, with whom you have no direct connection. If your son and his spouse wish to provide assistance, that is indeed honorable of them. However, you have every right to make your own decisions. Your considerations that your son, his wife, his ex, and multiple children living together under one roof may not be the best idea, especially given her pregnancy, are valid. The hope remains that this woman will find a suitable place to live and a partner willing to support and love her. However, it is important to realize that this situation is not your responsibility. The possibility that she may expect to be treated the same way by her ex as she is by her current husband can create additional tension and misunderstanding in your family. This woman, despite her difficult situation, should not automatically be seen as your responsibility. How they can afford so many children without proper education and protection is an open question. Your son and his ex need to take responsibility for their actions and the consequences of those actions, especially given their early parenthood. This case reminds me of the story of my brother who has 8 children by 3 different women. He has difficulty understanding the reasons for his life failures, which underscores the importance of being aware of and responsible for his choices and their consequences.